to those in the audience. Today we have Ms. Genevieve Bales from FHWA.
I think she stepped out for a second though.
Oh, sure. Okay, well, so we're glad to have her here.
My name is Jose Rodriguez. Last time that I spoke to the video was at the open, somebody faced and the reason that I'm here is I just want to talk about Title 6 a little bit. It's, I've been kind of educating myself Title 6 over here. Sometimes when you are an individual with disability, you start advocating for yourself, and you start seeing sometimes there are policies that they just happen out of nowhere, but sometimes those policies affect everybody without knowing. So it may affect me, but at the same time when they take place, affect everybody.
Yep.
So the problem is that if they affect me, I have my rights to defend myself as well. So I have the right to present a complaint. And if the complaint is valid, then everybody get affected. So that's how it goes. So that's how I guess policy works. You know, so you have to have the guts to be face to face. Last Tuesday, I had a really bad anxiety attack because I couldn't even figure out how bad it was seeing a well-developed plan of so many buses that they were going to be shut down or modified. It was so hard, and it just hit me so hard. Right now I can talk like it's okay. But that day it was hard. It was, for me it was a setback, you know, because I have been going to therapy. I retired from the army and I stayed like 2 years to do the VA. And believe me, it's been 4 days since I haven't closed my eyes, just working on this, thinking about it. And I tell you, I cannot file a complaint until the policy, the memorandum or the letter with all the 20 or 44 buses take. Some of them they get suspended or they get modified, and then that affects me. It's affecting me now, and it's in public right now. So, and it's mentally it's affecting me. You know, it's because sometimes I use the bus, and it's hard to figure out how I'm gonna do it. So, you know, it's hard for me. You know, it's gonna be hard for everybody else. So, and it's not about the money. You know, you have to think about this. When you talk about Title 6, they don't think about money. You actually have to see that they talk about low income. So I was in briefings the last couple of days. We were talking about money. We were talking about losses or what the city is going to do.
You're 3 minutes up, sir.
Well, I appreciate it for your time.
As we grant Mr. Rennie 1 extra minute, last time I moved to grant 1 additional minute so we can wrap up.
Sure.
Yes,
So, those in favor?
You have 1 additional minute.
no problem. Like I said, this right now I just as a therapy I do street photography. Some of you may see me in the streets. This week I haven't done street photography. I deviated completely. I will tell you what I have done. I have set up a gallery right there at the library. I have 5 or 7 pictures that actually go from here in El Paso. They're going to be displayed in Italy. One here from El Paso. One photo is going to be displayed in Dallas. Well, I hate being doing things that actually get the city in trouble. I appreciate for your time.
Good morning. My name is Dante Acosta. I'm the new regional director, district director for the El Paso region for the Small Business Administration. Cesar, how are you? Good to see you. It's truly an honor and a pleasure to be here. I served on an NPO, much like this one, in the Transportation Subcommittee back in California, where I'm from. I served on SCAG, the Southern California Association of Governments, as well as the California State Legislature. So transportation issues, we have a few of those in Los Angeles and California, and I'm looking forward to working with every one of you and your small business community, whether they want to do government contracting or they want to help with their small business. My staff and I are here available to you. I may be from California, however, my father was born right here in El Paso, Texas. So it's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. My wife and I recently relocated here and in the process of moving all of our stuff. But thank you so much for your time and your indulgence. I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce myself and let you know that our office is available to anyone that needs assistance with their small business or any other issues that they might have that we can assist with. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to discussion and action items. The first item is to approve the minutes for the August 23rd, 2019 TPB. Motion to approve. Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the August 23rd, 2019 meeting. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Item number 2, approve September 2019 project readiness report.
Good morning, President Nickel, Chairman of the CPAC Committee. In front of you, in your package, you've got the project readiness report. I'll point out a couple of things to you. Most of the projects that are in high alert are dealing with conformity issues, so we're just trying to make sure those projects get accomplished. I think all of them are basically the agencies that have those can come up and talk about them, but they are aware of these. They are on track to get issues resolved and get them underway, but that's why they're carrying a high alert. Otherwise, there's some minor, I'll call low alerts. Otherwise, the project's all in pretty good shape. Actually, it's a pretty clean report this month. Everything looks to be in good shape, moving forward like it needs to.
Okay. So on this one, we will need a motion to approve the September 2019 project readiness report.
I just have a question on when you said the agencies are currently reviewing it, does it mean the ball is in the agency's court for approval?
Actually, a variety of things when you look at them specifically, like I think there's a Telecom one that's dealing a little bit with a right of way that's supposed to close at the end of the month, which will then allow the project to move forward. They're very much aware of it, and the county can come up and speak to that one. Otherwise, the projects are just because they're tied to conformity, we really need them to take place in 2020. That's why they're getting the high alert assigned to them. So.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Casella Mendoza with the County of El Paso. The Billy Gunner project has a high alert just given the fact of the scope of construction activity that needs to happen before the end of the network year of 2020. But the progress has demonstrated continual movement. We just recently had our environmental approval issued. We're currently awaiting our letter of authority to be signed by the appropriate agencies. So we're currently awaiting that, but we are on track to let that project beginning in. And there's a number of ongoing initiatives that are related to that project that we have going on at the county. And so we are aware of the importance. It's a critical project for us, and so it's we feel very confident we can complete the scope of work in the necessary time. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could add something. Regarding the readiness report, in the last few weeks and since we presented the last readiness report back in May, the MPO staff has worked with all the implementing agencies, specifically the City of El Paso and TxDOT and all those, to get a better understanding or better definition of what these alerts are, right? So that we all agree what, if at the certain stage of development where the project is, well, is it on track or not? And that's basically what we want to show in these reports, that the project's on track. So we work with all the agencies to come up with a better definition so that it is, it's never been subjective as far as MPO staff, providing the alerts, if any. So now there's better understanding of what these alerts mean. So again, it's always been the intent for these reports to be sort of like, highlighting whenever there's a problem, well, with a certain project. It's never been the intent of making these like a gotcha exercise, right? So these reports, I think, are better reflection. This one specifically is a better reflection of the real health of the projects where they are.
Under what circumstances what alert would there be to, where a project would be in serious jeopardy or conformity issues?
So we determine, for example, if based on the proposed letting date of a project, and you start working backwards, right? So if your letting is, let's say, 9 months before, or let's say 9 months from the day of the report, you should be at least at 30%, and all of your activity should be at 30%. If all of them are, then you're okay. If one of them is not, then you get a yellow alert. If 2 of them are not, you get an orange. If 3 are not, then it's a red alert, right? And then if your project is, let's say, 6 months, same thing, you should be 60%, and maybe mix it a little bit of the percentages, but that's what it is. And we all agree that is a good reflection of the health of the project. So of course, if you are closer to letting, and especially like when we presented the last report that we were getting close to the end of the fiscal year, and if a project is not going to make the letting at the end of the fiscal year, then the board really needed to act to maybe push it to the next year, because if not, the project would suffer severe delays, right? So just wanted to mention that this is a much better, we feel it's a much better reflection of the actual health of the projects.
I guess I'm a little confused. So there are 2 projects on this list that are on high alert. If I understand what you're saying is, it's just an indication that the letting is going to be coming up at the end of next year. But there is no other concern with regard to the projects that are on high alert?
Well, the alert could be not necessarily projects that are closer to letting. Of course, the ones that are close to letting, are more sensitive, right? But even if your project is letting in 9 months, if you are not showing a certain
Progress?
Progress, right? Then that's an alert. I mean, it means that you still have 9 months to fix it, right? You have more time to fix it so that you can make your letting.
Okay,
Right.
so the 2 projects that are on high alert in these documents, are they just because of the time, or because there is a concern on making the necessary progress? So I found 2 of them.
I can answer a little bit of that. Both these projects that are on high alert need to finish by the end of fiscal year 2020 for conformity issues. That's why they're getting the alert, because we want to make sure they get, there's every indication now that they can start, but make sure that we stay in conformity, we need those to be sure they stay on track, okay?
All right, so it's just more the time period, not because they're not on track currently.
Correct. Maybe in the best of worlds, they'd be further along, but that's not to say they're not okay. I don't want to make that sound like that, right? It's just that part of our conformity and making sure we stay in good standing, these projects absolutely need to kind of meet their deadlines that they've got, and they've got every indication they can do it. But they're going to we want to heighten the awareness of them, right? That's all. So we make sure they stay on track.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
So, I'm sorry, just to be clear, so what specifically what recommendations are we approving today that you all are
Just the
recommending?
readiness report.
Just the readiness.
That's all we're asking you to do, is approve the readiness report.
Any questions? If none, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the readiness report.
So moved.
Second.
Your question?
No, just a motion to approve.
Okay, second. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Next item.
Number 3 is to amend the SEMA 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the SEMA 2019-2023 Transportation program. A, update the project description for the central business district. 4, project in fiscal year 2020.
Okay. I'm going to take these separately, if we may, so. Sure. Pretty straightforward. I think it's just, in this case, we're just trying, like it states, here, is update the project description. It's a little bit of housekeeping, making sure we've got the project correctly identified. And looking for a recommendation to approve item 3A. I'm going to talk to 3B in a moment.
Do you want to talk about both items and we'll just take them together?
I'd like to take them separately, and you'll understand in a moment.
Okay. Any questions regarding 3A?
Are you amending or are you updating? 3A. I didn't hear what you said.
Yeah, we're asking for approval of item 3A, which is update to project description.
This is just to take into account because the original project limits of CDD4 has changed because of like some of the work has already been done with the streetcar, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, there was a discrepancy between the description on the PE phase and the construction phase. So the intent of this item is just to clean up and make sure that everything is consistent with limits, where the work is going to be. So on this one, the recommendation from TPAC is for the board to approve.
Second.
All right, it's a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Item B.
Item 3B, you want to read?
Item 3B is the Total Federal Transit Administration Lost Arts Fund.
That item.
Okay. I'm going to ask that y'all delete item 3B. This one actually has some language that is missing that we need to get incorporated into the action. This one again is kind of a housekeeping one. Unfortunately, it's not in a state today to be approved. We have time to correct it. This is scheduled to go to for a STIP revision in November, so you'll see this item again in October after we've made corrections to what was posted. So I'm asking for your recommendation to delete it.
Move to delete 3B.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to delete item 3B. Those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Thank you.
Item number 4, the Regional Mobility Fund.
Mr. Chair, Eduardo Carlo, Executive Director of the MPO. So we're moving now to the reports. The first report is on the El Paso Mobility Plan. We presented this to you all last month, and so this is an update just to give you a little more detail of where we are. As you know, you've got the presentation in front of you. So as we mentioned before, the key features of the mobility plan will be to select our priority projects that will be multimodal, in other words, including highway transit, active transportation projects, bike, pedestrian, and projects also that address freight. Multi-jurisdictional, we want to make sure that we cover geographically that the projects are throughout the region, and also looking at projects that have a good cross-border impact that benefit the movement of freight and people across our border. The plan is going to be looking at all funding opportunities, whether it's traditional funding, looking at the state, local, and public-private participations as well. The plan will also reflect the strongest regional priorities. That's one of the things that you heard me say a lot of times, and I'll say it again. We've got to make sure that we communicate our priorities very well. And consensus. That's the other thing, that whenever we come up with this plan, as soon as the plan is approved by this board, we all have to make sure that we communicate the same message whenever we go out and look for funding. So the main inputs for the mobility plan, several. One of them is a congestion management process, a CMP, that you all have seen some of the presentations that MPO staff have given to you all. We're in the process of finishing the CMP update. We anticipate bringing the final version to you all in the month of November. The CMP analyzes congestion throughout the region, so the CMP also looks for solutions to congestion. So whatever strategies, whether they are transit related, they are capacity or travel demand or transportation demand management type of strategies, those will be looked at, and those strategies will be candidates to be part of the mobility plan. The RMS, which is another effort that we presented to you all, the Regional Mobility Strategy, you know that strategy identified 4 Keystone Highway projects. It's one of the features, but it also analyzed the freight rail corridors, and that's going to be very helpful to identify some of the most important at-grade intersections, the ones that have the highest impacts today, whether it's safety, delay, emissions, and so on. So again, that could be a source of projects that could be incorporated into the mobility plan. But also in speaking with all the MPO partners here, the municipalities, the county, TxDOT, we have been talking about coming up also with the list of their own priority projects. Again, we talked to the city of El Paso, with the city of Socorro, Horizon City, and TxDOT. So again, it's also important to understand what projects are priorities for each of the individual municipalities. Again, it's got to be a balance between regional significance, but also local priorities. We're also going to look at project readiness, where these projects, where are they in terms of their project development, and when can they be implemented. That timing is very important when we start matching the available funding. So right now, as you know, we've heard that the TxDOT approved the fiscal year 2020 Unified Transportation Program last month, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later. So that also gave us some funding levels that we can use to plan for the next 10 years, which is good news for us, I think, overall. Well, this is just to give you an idea of the CMP network that has been defined by the group that is working on this. So in this map, you see the most important segments or pieces of our transportation network. We're analyzing, you see on this map, the links or the segments that have the highest congestion levels. And we are prioritizing, also looking at the highest congested segments as part of the CMP. So again, when we look at these, we will be developing strategies. Well, we, meaning the ad hoc committee, along with NPO staff, to identify those solutions, which will be, again, inputs to the mobility plan. Back now to the schedule for the mobility plan. We presented this last time. This is to show how it ties in with the development of next year's Unified Transportation Program by TxDOT. So right now, TxDOT already started the development of the fiscal year 21 UTP. So we've got to make sure that our mobility plan synchronizes with their development schedule, so that our priority projects are, enter into the pipeline with sufficient time, so that they can be, vetted and discussed as it goes through the internal TxDOT process. Sorry. So here you see that between October and March is when the central office of TxDOT in Austin collects all the projects and then evaluates them and starts matching funding opportunities with them. So again, our process needs to synchronize with that. So for our mobility plan, here are some of the milestones. In August, we started the one-on-one conversations with all the implementing agencies, like I said before, with the city of El Paso, with Socorro, with Horizon City, with TxDOT, and start identifying also, some of the potential funding opportunities. In August, last month, the fiscal year 2020 UTP also got approved. That's an important milestone. In September, we were finalizing or have finalized the one-on-one meetings. On the 9th, the CMP ad hoc committee started identifying the initial strategies that are part of the CMP that, as I said before, are going to be feeding into the plan. Today, we're updating the policy board, and we anticipate that by the 30th, the MPO staff will have a pretty good list of all the candidate projects that have been collected from all the agencies and that are coming up also from the CMP. So that in October, between the end of September and early October, we can start the evaluation of all these candidate projects. We're going to go through an evaluation process initially to look at the impact of these projects. And we will have, on the 2nd of October, we'll present the draft list to TPAC. And we anticipate bringing that draft list to you all at the October Policy Board meeting, which is on the 18th. And then again, in November, we will finalize a list of projects. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of discussions in between. We'll take it to TPAC, and then on the 15th of November, we'll come back here to the Policy Board. And that'll be the day that the congestion management process is adopted by the board, or that we anticipate that happening. And we will also have the final list of our projects for the mobility plan. And then starting from that day on, we will be working with TxDOT, with the El Paso District folks, and the Transportation Planning and Programming Division, which is the one that puts together the Unified Transportation Program, and start working with them and making sure that our projects are incorporated and we make a good case for funding. I think at that time, it'll be very important for all of us to start doing our jobs in terms of making sure that the TxDOT administration and the commission understands our priorities and that we have a unified message with that. So again, TxDOT will be putting together that UTP in March, I believe it's in March, when they put the draft UTP. And then between March and August, it's when they go through the various iterations, public involvement, and so on. So with that, that's what I have for the mobility plan. Questions?
I have a question. Is this one microphone? When you were talking about the RMS, you were talking about the freight rate corridors. Could you tell me what those are?
Yeah, as part of RMS, what the group did was look at the freight rail corridors, the Union Pacific corridors, basically from downtown going east. That's one of the lines, but also the line that goes up to Kansas City, that goes through 5 Points. So we identified all of the at-grade intersections, the ones that are at-grade today, and did not a highly technical analysis, but it was a pretty good analysis to give us an idea of the impacts. Again, in safety, I mean, that's very easy to determine the number of and severity of accidents, but also looking at the impact in terms of delay and emissions, air quality. So from there, there are many at-grade intersections, especially the line that goes parallel to I-10. That there's a lot of local streets that do not show a lot of negative impacts, but you have the big ones, the obvious ones. The at-grade intersection of Socorro Road, for example, Horizon Boulevard. Those are the top two intersections. Ms. Bales is here. She would like to make a comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I'll make a comment. The comment is, how does this relate to the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the Transportation Improvement Program? So that comes next. Once we adopt our mobility plan, once we agree on what the projects are, then part of the job is to make sure that these projects make it into the formal process. It may be that some projects may be currently in the plan, but maybe in the outer years. So part of our job, which I will talk to you in a little bit, will be to make sure that those projects are moved within the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, within the timing that they should be. Once those projects are funded, then they move into the TIP, into the TIP, right? Once real funding is identified. So again, as I think what Genevieve wants to make sure, that's a very good point. Within the federal transportation planning process, we've got the CMP, which is one of the inputs. Then you identify projects through public involvement, stakeholder involvement, and then those projects make it into the MTP, which is our long-range plan. And then as they move forward and funding is identified, they move into the TIP. Is that a fair? I'm sorry? Correct, correct. In the MTP, of course, you all know that the MTP is also a fiscally constrained plan. So the funding has to be identified within the MTP. It's longer range, so the threshold is not as important. But once in order for a project to make it into the TIP, that is real money. So that really is. But again, these are projects that are near implementation. So with that, that's my update for the plan.
Public comment, please.
Before public comment, where are the opportunities for public outreach? I guess maybe you can talk a little bit more, I guess, for public input and public outreach for this process.
I mean, clearly, TPAC and the TPB will be opportunities for public involvement. We haven't determined yet if we're going to have more meetings in terms of developing the mobility plan itself. Now, as the projects make it into the MTP and amendments are done to the MTP and to the TIP, of course, those are other opportunities for public comment as well.
Questions before we have public comment?
Okay to come up?
Public comment.
Yes.
Don't go away, Eduardo.
So you gotta be nice to me.
Mike Rooney, it's more of a question. Could you put that chart up on the screen? I'm trying to figure out how to interpret it. So one with the red, it's 2020 TMD congested links. Like when I look at global reach, like in a 24-hour period, I'll have used that area 4 times. This little section on Edgemere between Lee Trevino and Yarborough. Now, what are those red lines specifically telling me? Before I start raising hell with Ted and my city representative.
So on that map in particular, these are segments that are identified both from the travel demand models, the ones that have the highest VC ratios.
Is that the one the UTEP students were building?
No, this is coming out of our travel demand model. And also, the ones in blue are segments that are identified also by TTI's work on our region.
Okay, I guess the reason I'm asking, I use that section of Edgemere all the time, and the streets out there aren't on a grid system, they're more a contour, and it kind of loops around. There's a low area, the city has a ponding area that'll flood.
Right.
Now, the biggest thing is, I'm an old guy, sick, I'm kind of shaky, so I drive like the little old lady from Pasadena, and I mean, the people are using Edgemere at 40 miles an hour or plus. I had a guy in a pickup almost pushed me off the road, so to me, it seems like it's more of a traffic control. Now, that global reach, like this morning, at the morning time and evening time, you got people going to Fort Bliss and stuff. So is it a traffic control problem, or?
Well, I mean, it's congested, so what we can do is we can get together with you, Mr. Rooney, and.
Oh, no, I just want to know,
Yes.
okay, I didn't want to beat up on Ted unnecessarily. Thank you, and thank you.
Any questions or comments? There's no action on this item.
The next item is amendment to the December 24th MTP and the Transportation Conformity Report, 8 projects and 8 fiscal districts.
All right, so this item is related also to the the item before. So what we are doing here is letting you all know that we are gonna start the process to amend the current plan, which is the 2045 Destino. The need to amend the plan started with a project that Mr. McNichol referred to you in the readiness report, which is a Loop 375 project that spans, adds a lane and frontage roads between Montana Avenue and Spur 601. That is a project that is ready to go, but there is one utility that's become a problem. It's really out of TxDOT's hands. It's really something that Fort Bliss and the utility company need to fix. But the consequence to us is that project was in the 2020 network, which means that it should be open to traffic by the end of 2020. And because of these delays, it clearly will not be open to traffic. So, the fix is to move it out of the 2020 network so that we are in compliance with conforming. So that's what started the discussion. Before I go into more detail, I should say that we visited with Federal Highway on August 29th. Anyone here from the district and I visited with Federal Highway. Genevieve was there, and the whole air quality team, Jose Campos and Barbara Maley and others, to see really if there was any other way of doing it. Because as you all know, amending the plan requires doing another conformity analysis and documentation, and you know how long that process can be and how onerous it could be. But the bottom line is that there's no way around it. We have to amend the plan to do that. So the challenge, we turn it also into, try to turn it into an opportunity. So if we're going to amend the plan, well, that gives us also an opportunity to do other amendments as well, cleanup, or, as I said before, projects that are in the mobility plan that require some type of amendment. Well, this is a good opportunity to do it. Also, the fiscal year 20 UTP that gave us a little more, changed the funding, most of it good for us. It also allows us to add more projects into the plan, so might as well make those amendments. So again, we're going to be starting that process. What you see there on the screen and the map, this scheduler is also in your backup. These are a simplification of all the activities that the NPO is going to be engaged in the next 3 to 4 years. So the first 4 bars represent the new plan that needs to be completed by November of 2022. But now on top of that, we're showing there the development of the regional mobility plan. We're showing also the UTP cycle to see how it matches. But then we added the 4 additional bars that represent the amendment to the 2045 plan, our current 2045 Destino plan. So again, just to show you that NPO staff will be very busy with all these activities. It's all good, but it's going to be a ton of work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eduardo, can you expand what utility we're talking about and what the issue is with the utility?
Mr. Blanco, could you repeat that? We couldn't hear you.
Sure. The question was who is the utility, to identify the utility that we're having the issue with, and what if you can expand on what that issue is.
EPMPO TPB Department of Transportation. So the utility company in question is Petroleum Lines, New Star.
Sorry, we can't hear you.
Yes, okay, so it's New Star Petroleum. So they have a petroleum line that runs in between the frontage road, between the frontage road and the main lanes. We are changing the alignment on Route 375 because we have those curves. Been a lot of safety issues in there. So that line has to be moved. That utility company happens to have issues around the state that they're trying to resolve with other districts as well. So we don't have the confidence that they will be out of the way by the time this project needs to land. It's third party. We don't have control over it. We've done our coordination over the last 3 years. And it's just they have a lot of things going on around the state. So that's
Could you repeat the name of the utility? New Star?
New Star. Yes, it's over a mile, and then
Yeah,
it's
it's
conflict
really
with the project itself, and then it goes on to the side of the front.
Is this work schedule available online?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
So right now, you said it's indefinite right now, or?
We continue to work with them, so we're trying to find a way to let the projects, however, in order, so that we, as a region, don't fall into any trouble in the future. So we've coordinated with the NPO, and so making this move will allow us to continue to work with them. At the same time, if we were to let, and the project doesn't get completed by 2020, we would still be good with the conformity. So this is, we tried to bring it up as early as we could when we thought this is not gonna work out with the schedule for conformity. And so that's why we've been working with the NPO and Federal Highway to resolve the issue.
These are there's problems in other districts throughout Texas. I mean, have you got any indication as to how long it's taking to resolve those issues?
That's why we're asking for this. Some of the other districts, Houston and other large districts, very large projects. It depends issue by issue. Sometimes there are minor conflicts, but when you're dealing with some of the mega projects in Houston, sometimes those take quite a bit of time and resources. And again, they've been very cooperative. However, we're to the point now where even if we let it in May, we won't be able to finish and have it open to the public by 2020. So that's the reason why we waited till we thought this is the last opportunity that we need to make sure that we're good with Federal Highway and the NPO.
One more question. Is it a large portion of the roadway that line parallels, or is
It's
it
over a
just a
mile.
section?
Over a mile of the project.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Is there any, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, any additional cost for the switch?
No, there's not an additional cost. There's portions of it that for them would be reimbursable, so that's why they're interested in doing it. Part of it is not, but there's no cost to the state or to any of the parks here.
No action for this item.
Item number 6, TxDOT Unified Transportation Program funding categories.
All right, Mr. Chair, we wanted to bring to the board a sort of a brief description of the funding categories that are included in TxDOT's UTP. And I'm gonna do it with Art. You're gonna be, you and I, we're doing a tag team here. So again, as you know, the UTP is a 10-year plan that TxDOT uses to program projects. 12 categories in general, and we'll go over the categories and the dollar amounts, and then we'll make some comments that are relevant on some of the categories that are more relevant to us. So with that, Art, we'll start.
Good morning, Art Estrada with TxDOT El Paso District. So like the Development mentioned, these funding categories are all laid out and presented in the TxDOT's Unified Transportation Program. It's approved by the Texas Transportation Commission every year, so it's an annual process. These funding allocations that I'll go over briefly are the ones that apply specifically to the El Paso District and the El Paso MPO. The first funding category, and of course there's 12 funding categories here. First funding category is our preventative maintenance and rehab funding category. Excuse me, so this funding category addresses specific preventative maintenance and rehabilitation needs in our district. Of course, El Paso MPO area plus our rural area combined for a total allocation for this specific category. Preventative maintenance addresses the need to preserve our pavement structure. Rehabilitation specifically just means the repair of existing assets and transportation assets. I'll tag team this one with Eduardo since it's a big portion of our allocation throughout the 10 years. This is category 2 funding category or metropolitan funding category. This funding category is specifically for corridors and the expansion and the added capacity of our infrastructure. We fund specific keystone projects with this funding category, since it's a substantial amount that we get. It's the highest amount that we get within the standard funding categories. We do select projects that are important to the region. These are projects that TxDOT develops on the state highway system as it's required for this funding category, as well as coordination with El Paso MPO. Now, Eduardo mentioned earlier that the CMP, the Comprehensive Mobility Plan, plays a big part now in what new leadership, both here at the MPO and at the district, in terms of coordination for the priority of the project selected for this Comprehensive Mobility Plan. But, yeah, anything else to?
Yeah, so one of the things that we wanted to highlight here, if you look at the third column there, the project selection guidelines, I think it's important. Each funding category obviously has its own rules and procedures and eligibility requirements, et cetera, et cetera. So category 2 is important, but it's important to understand that what it says there, MPO select projects in consultation with TxDOT. So it is important for this board to understand that we select the projects here. Now the projects have to be on the state highway system for category 2 to be funded. So again, once those projects are identified for funding here, they've got to reflect the priorities of this policy board.
Category 4 is our statewide connectivity funding category. This is also important. Category 4 urban is a funding category that is coordinated through the Texas Transportation Commission. It is provided to TxDOT districts to address connectivity to major corridors. So this funding category, although there's no specific funding allocation program in the UTP, it's coordinated with our division, TPP division, through the Texas Transportation Commission through a project call. So we submit our top priority projects for this type of funding, as well as the next funding category that we'll discuss, Cat 12, for award and eventually programming into the UTP document.
Let me just say something also about category 4. Can you go back, please? This is look at the project selection guidelines. I mean, this is a little bit different from category 2. It says TxDOT districts select category 2 regional projects in consultation with EPMP. So again, this is a little different. These are projects that are initiated more internally by TxDOT. One difference that Art mentioned between category 2 and category 4, which again is very important. Category 2 is one of the formula categories where El Paso gets a certain allocation. It's a fixed amount. That amount can be spread out within the 10 years. There's flexibility as we choose projects. But category 4, we don't get necessarily an allocation. These are projects that go to the commission, and the commission ultimately has the authority to approve them. All right, so let's move to category 5, which is 5 and 7 are the 2 categories that are controlled by the MPO. 5 is CMAQ, which is basically projects that address air quality. The intent is to reduce emissions of pollutants. The process. 5 and 7 have, not only do they have an allocation throughout the 10 years, but they also have yearly allocations. We have to program projects based on yearly yearly amounts. And that's what the MPO has been doing for many years. Okay, can you do 7?
So category 7 is our call our SDP, our Metro Mobility Plan. It's also a funding category that is listed in the UTP. It's a funding allocation that proposes the most flexibility in terms of its use. here at the NPO. The projects are selected by this board and in coordination with the El Paso NPO staff, the information provided. So this is a category that has substantially helped the region in terms of its use. Anything from ridge projects to landscape to mobility to widening type of projects, operational improvements on intersections. So it holds a lot of flexibility. It is constrained by fiscal year, and the region's allocation for Category 7 is laid out in the 10 years of the Unified Transportation Program. So we have an outlook for the next 10 years in this funding category on an annual basis in the UT. Category 8 is our safety. The majority of our projects are run through our highway safety improvement program. So this is a very competitive program that is selected based on our traffic division in Austin and the federally mandated safety indices. Category 9 is our transportation alternative set-aside program. This is again, federal funds coming from FHWA distributed to the NPOs and the state, specifically for the use of sidewalks, bicycle infrastructure, pedestrian, bicycle signals, traffic calming techniques, and also transportation projects to fall in compliance with ADA standards. Category 9, before we move on, Category 9 Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program is annual allocation that's provided to the El Paso NPO. It's also laid out in a program in the Unified Transportation Plan. I believe our annual allocation is about 1.4 million per year. So that is run through the El Paso NPO through the project call here at the NPO. Category 10 is again, a flexible funding category that includes several programs. Specifically, one of the main ones that fall within Category 10 is our Coordinated Border Infrastructure, our CBI program. Of course, I'll let Eduardo speak to that a little bit more since in the upcoming month we'll have an opportunity to program some funds that became available in the CBI program. Category 11 is our district discretionary amount. So this is an amount that's very specific to the El Paso district. It's provided every year. It is constrained to an annual allocation. This is up to the discretion of the district. We have in the past programmed these funds on needed areas in the rural part of our district, as well as here in the MPO area to cover projects that need supplemental funds. It's not a lot of funding, 2.5 million per year, but it's something that certainly plays a role in the discretion and how the district and how flexible it is for the district to be able to use this. Category 12 is another, as I mentioned before, Category 12 is at the discretion of the Transportation Commission. It addresses specifically big projects, significant keystone projects in the area that provide congestion and connectivity, addresses energy sector needs, economic opportunities. Obviously, if there's a military base in your area, the efficiency of the routes that lead to that military base. So this is a funding category that the district, the El Paso district, gathers our priority projects in coordination with NPO, and then submits them to the Places Transportation Commission every year for consideration of for funding allocation.
Can you stay on that? Make that a little bigger. So we're not considered I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. We're not considered a large metro area still?
Well, for the Texas clear lanes, I think that's what you're referring to. That is within Category 12, something that the commission, like carved a chunk of money that is dedicated to the 5 largest areas. So we're not included, today, we're not included as, under the Clear Lanes program. However, category 12 overall is really where the big bucks are. And that's really what we should be targeting in terms of when we go out and ask for the bigger projects. Our target really is category 12. I mean, category 2 is very important, obviously, because it funds some of the bigger projects, the bigger corridor projects, but the dollar amount is fixed. Right? Category 4 is also interesting in the sense that you know, although we compete with the rest of the state, but it's also a good chunk of money that within the UTP dollars allocated to category 4. 5 and 7 are the ones that are you know, we've had, or the MPOs have had access to you know, throughout the, you know, for many years. But as far as strategy, and again, our mobility plan that we will be developing, as I said before, in the next couple of months, our target really is category 12. We need to go out and show the commission that El Paso has a good set of projects. We have a very good story to tell, and that these projects are important, are priority for us, and they, you know, there is consensus locally for that.
The problem with that, though, is that we may not be the largest metro area population-wise, but land mass-wise, we're as big, if not bigger, than we're as big as those areas. I think we're as big as Fort Worth in terms of land mass.
You mean the districts?
I'm talking about the number of roads that we have to maintain, the number of roads we have to construct. Because right now, we're only getting 1.8% of the funding, but we're 4.4% of the population. And so that's just one metric. But I wonder if we're also talking about lane miles. How much lane miles we have to maintain and or replace versus the lane miles that we have to replace in those other districts.
Right. So I think that there's two ways of looking at funding in the UTP. One way is looking at the formula categories, like category 1, which is for maintenance, category 2, which is also based on formula. And this is a discussion that we had is, you know, is El Paso getting its fair share or not? That's something that has been discussed for many, many years, and I really don't have the answer for that. But I think the where we should go and we should target is really category 12, because that's really where the big bucks are. If we want to somehow balance the funding, you know, and get our bigger share, I think our chances are much better having a solid plan and getting more dollars from category 12.
So while I still have the floor, I have a question on the other item. We're moving Loop 375 to another fiscal year as the previous item. What happens to the $10 million that was recently added by TxDOT to that project? Does it carry over with the year?
Yes, it is.
That was the one that was administratively approved, the one that the
Yes.
one that the so it was still approved, but it just moved to the next year.
Right.
Just wanted the board to know that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along the lines of city manager, the other criteria is congestion. And I'm looking at one of the category 12 factors is border and port connectivity. None of those MPOs that are the larger ones have port activity, right? So.
Just a correction, we've been supplanted by the River Valley.
And that's
So
the other thing that Tommy brought up last,
they
is that they're about to unify.
They have unified and they are.
And
now
right,
number 4.
right, so they're gonna move up in terms of population, they're gonna move up in terms of priority.
The other thing, Representative, that Dallas did, they have a land port. They've been pushing the land port forever, and in terms of a base. So just FYI, to your point, I'm just adding to your point that that's where they've done that in order to get more points.
So having said all this, I mean, we're based on the criteria that's set up that under category 12, we're looking at falling below, just set on the criteria. What do we need to do as a body to talk to the commission about how we remain competitive? What are the recommendations?
In my view, like I said before, we have to make it very difficult for them to say no. How do we do that? By showing a plan that shows priorities, that shows projects that have a lot of backup behind them, that are not just, you know, out of whim or because somebody wants them or not. These have to be projects that have a lot of good information in it, so we can demonstrate the need for them. You know, clearly we don't have the congestion levels that Houston and Dallas and other of the major cities have, but the importance also of El Paso strategically for trade, whether it's north, south, or east, west, that's a story that we need to tell. But again, you know, we have to do it in a way that is comprehensive, that is, you know, smart, and make it very difficult for them to tell us no. Now, as far as the yes, you know, the Rio Grande, the 3 MPOs have officially joined now, so now they're the 6th largest MPO in the state. Yeah, that carries a little more weight. Unfortunately for us geographically, you know, we're 550 miles away from Austin. We're far away from the I-35 corridor, which is obviously one of the main corridors in the state of Texas, but you know, it is what it is. So we have to highlight the importance that we have as strategically here as a gateway to the West Coast.
I think with what you're saying, I think that in terms of when, and this is for all of us, in terms of when we're doing that and looking at that criteria, we really do have to focus on what we have, on what they don't have, which is like border connectivity. I mean, we definitely have to emphasize that when we're submitting projects, as well as military deployment, I mean, as well as military. So I think in terms of, I think it's, you know, incumbent on all of us in terms of when we're submitting projects, we have to make sure that they're responding to that, or capitalize on what we do have that they don't have.
Absolutely. So again, we need to have a very good story to tell when we go and present our projects. But I totally agree with you on that. Highlight that.
Better with this super program. Not only do we have to have a good story to tell, but we have to go and tell it over and over again. I recently attended the last meeting of the Texas Transportation Commission, and it was remarkably quiet from West Texas. The Permian Basin had 15 people there, and we had
The Midland Odessa people have what's called MOTRAN, Midland
Yeah.
Odessa Transportation
And
Coalition, which is a 501c6.
They had-
And Ports of Plains is there, I-35 Coalition is there.
And we were very active. It was obvious they had been telling their story, and they got what they wanted. The Rio Grande Valley was there with 30 people. They got what they wanted. Austin was there. They got what they wanted. It was just very obvious to me that we were underrepresented and we're not telling our story. Just like we have to have a good story to tell, but we have to tell it often and on a regular basis.
We need to get our priorities in order. I know
Which is exactly what
the last 5 years where we argued over crumbs because of that 1.8% of funding we get, and we represent 4.4%. That's what we've been doing as a board, fighting over those small dollars that we get because everybody wants them. And so we don't have a prioritized list.
Which is exactly what was trying to put together, right?
Yes, sir, I agree.
And
Because when we go, we can't be out there and then somebody up here saying, well, that's not what our priority is, and then the commission hears that and it'll be like, they don't have their act together.
And it was just screamingly obvious that we were deficient in our presence.
Exactly right, and that's what I was referring to, that once we have these priorities, then all of us have to do our part, whether it's the Mobility Coalition here in El Paso. I mean, they can do their lobbying. State delegation, you guys can do, you know, what you can do as MPO staff will do what we can do as policy board members. I mean, all of us have to do our job, but the message has to be consistent.
I have to say that in the past, we have not gotten together to where we have been a force. And I think that is reflective on the funding that we have received. However, this last year, we are working on it and we are getting it together and the commission knows it. The only thing I'd want to add to what was said, I think category 12 is incredibly important, but I also don't wanna overlook the other categories because we're trying to push now changes in the criteria on the important categories for this district in order to obtain additional funding in that regard, because we're lacking behind on funding in other categories that really could be increased for this community based on our size. So it's an effort that has commenced. It's been going on for about a year now, and a little over a year, and so there is work in this community taking place in order to improve what has been happening in the past.
Mr. Chair, comment on this discussion. Part of one of the components of the CNP plan, and a very important one that provides that message, is the ability to program every dollar that we have in this UTP plan. So like Representative Ortega mentioned, whatever allocation we have to make sure that we program every dollar so as to combine it together, consolidate it via this comprehensive mobility plan, and then provide that message to the commission that we are taking advantage of our resources, specifically with categories such as category 5 CMAC, 7, category 10 CBI. So we would essentially have a full set of projects that are already funded, and the need for the ones that are not.
One more comment also on category 12. The difference between the fiscal year 19 and the fiscal year 20 UTP for El Paso was that we got 2 projects through category 12 funded. That was about $200 million that we didn't have before. So, yeah, I mean, that is good money that was programmed for one project, one of the 4 priority projects, but that's money that we didn't have before. So, and that came on category 12. So that's why I see it as a very good thing. Do we want more? Of course we want more. And do we want more also on the formula categories? Of course. But I think really the strategy is in making sure that that they know that we need part of that of the dollars from category 12.
You know, I apologize. One last little comment. I'm fairly new and getting familiar with the whole processes. But even with the federal funding, I mean, coming up with a new census, they relatively kind of look at that information as well to set up some of the funding federally for this. And areas like us, we always kind of lose out because the people don't really participate with us, and that's kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. Wouldn't ideally, if we're looking at trying to support our story to tell, on a larger scale, also kind of be or be also dependent on some of the numbers that might be pulled or coming up with the census, especially here in our area. If we get more participation in people that actually respond and fill out the census, couldn't that possibly even help us on the federal funding level?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the census is one of the bases for the federal funding in general. For transportation, of course, population is one of the, not the only criteria, but it's one of the important criteria also for determining our funding allocations.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? There's no action for item number 6.
Item number 7 is training and absences of members on EPMPO committees. So I have attached the fiscal years 2018-2019 training log. There you can see what training this fiscal year and the carryover amounts that you guys will have for the next fiscal year for your training. I included a link for the education policy, which is provided in your packet and is also available on the EPMPO website. I will be sending before October 1st an online training course, information that might help you, and I'm going to also be giving you information. We're going to be providing trainings before the TPB meetings so that you guys can attend to those. The absences, just want to remind you that on October 1st, there were 2 resets. And they have changed, and I gave a link to the MPO bylaws there in your packet that you guys can see, which is TPB and EC will have the same amount of absences, and then TPAC, which are some members that do serve on both TPAC and TPB, those stayed the same, and so they're going to be different for TPB and TPAC.
The absences will reset, so we'll reset beginning of the next meeting. And so we'll go to training hours. Okay, no action on this item. So, next item.
Item number 8, the executive director reports. A, master schedule. B, draft federal certification review report. And C, Texas meeting updates.
Mr. Chair, I'll do the report from here. The master schedule we already discussed in one of the other items was just to show all the different activities that the NPO will be involved in the next couple of years. Moving on to be the draft federal certification report. We received the report, the draft report on September 4th. Basically, the Federal Highway Administration is asking us to take a look at, just for make any edits or any recommendations as far as technicalities and so on. As you know, the review itself was performed in August of 2018. That was more than a year ago, and we really hope to have Federal Highway come in and provide the findings and discuss the findings as soon as possible. And not to put you on the spot, Genevieve, but do you have any timeline for that?
We're just waiting to get your comments back, and then we can talk about scheduling something.
Could it be perhaps in maybe next month or November?
Maybe November. Next month, our funding is a little questionable still for federal highways and federal transit, so I have to work with federal transit.
Okay. All right, so then in a couple of months we'll get the formal presentation from Federal Highway on the findings of the review. I should say that we are aware of what the findings are and all that, and some of the serious one, MPO staff immediately initiated the process to correct the ones that were a bit more serious, having to do with the congestion management process, the CMP, which will be completing the update in the month of November. And there's several others that also that MPO staff jumped right after the review was held last year. So I think we're in pretty good shape with those. I don't know if you have any questions or comments on that.
Public comment, please. If it's possible.
Mr. Ryan?
Okay to come up?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Public comment laws have to change.
Mike Rooney, thanks for being patient with me. That red section on that earlier chart still haunts me, and this is why it does. Your dangerous intersection is Yarborough and Edgemere. Traffic coming south on Yarborough, turning east or left on Edgemere. So that intersection should be looked at. To me, I see the danger that that small section of Edgemere is kind of a small abbreviated S. And at my suggestion, the city put the bike lane in instead of putting it on Montana, which at the time, this was a number of years ago, which I thought would be unbelievably dumb. The city moved it over to Edgemere. The people living there, if they're trying to turn on to Edgemere, going east or west, just because of the construction of the road, they have to edge out into towards the intersection more. So it's dangerous for them if people are speeding. The city doesn't have a lot of extra money. They have other roads that are worse off that are basically CRAP. So as a simple, inexpensive solution, could you just put one of those, the signs that flip up? I think they're solar powered, that give the speed there to just reduce the speed in that area. But I hate for the city, because it's some short, to have to start dumping a lot of money in there where we have other areas that really need it. So could you please consider just putting one of those simple speed signs that we have in a number of places, even if it's a portable one, and see how it works and it can be moved. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chair, so I'm on C now. Just a brief update on the Texas Transportation Committee meeting that I attended in August. We have discussed a lot of that, but just wanted to highlight 3 things on that meeting. First of all, that the comments that I made were the ones that consistent with the letter that we sent dealing with CMAQ, with Category 5, where since San Antonio is now designated as non-attainment, the CMAQ pot remains the same, but now it's cut into more slices. So we lost about $2 million per year on CMAQ, which may not sound like a lot of money, but anything hurts. The request was to the commission, well, make us whole, right? At least for the first 4 years or the duration of the tip, but it didn't happen. The second comment that I made was related to tolls, which actually it was a good thing, because in the final version of the UTP, the commission decided to keep the tolling elements of 4 major projects throughout the state. That was about $1.5 billion, which is good for us, because without that toll money, then those projects would be competing for the other money that we compete for. So now those projects have $1.5 billion worth of tolls for their implementation. So that's a good thing.
Billion or billion?
Billion. Right. And then the last thing that became very obvious was that we already discussed the fact that the Rio Grande Valley MPO was formally created. So actually the new MPO got a lot of money for projects within the new big MPO region, projects that connect to the ports of entry. So, I mean, those are obviously very important projects for them, but again, it's another wake-up call for us as well, that competition is getting very, very tough at the state level. So just an FYI for that. That's all I have for my report.
Any questions or comments? That is the last item on our agenda. The next meeting of the TPB is scheduled for 9 a.m. October 18, 2019 at the El Paso MPO office.
I do have one comment that I'd like to already work on. What you just said about the slices, there's more slices in the pie, the same pie. I think it's important that we talk about this, but we need to have some talking points, some documentation that backs it up about the 1.8% versus 4.4% of the population and the type of funding we're getting, not representative of that population number. In the 90s, Texas in general, all these different cities, all these different coalitions worked on getting a fair share from the federal government. Because we didn't get a dollar. For every dollar we put in from the federal tax, we were only getting like 78 cents. And I think now we're at 91 cents. We're still not at a dollar. But that 13, 14 cents is a big number. So the 1.8% to 4.4%, that's a big number. If we can quantify that and determine how much money that is is one of our strategies should be. Because all these things that you mentioned, they're gonna change. CMAQ's gonna vacillate back and forth based on who's not taking this, that, and the other. We need to have a strategy that's overarching, that goes beyond and transcends the day-to-day, the policies they have in place. And so if you could work on that, I think that would be something that we all could benefit from, and that would be a priority that everybody should echo when we go to the Transportation Commission.
I know that there's been other efforts recently in terms of looking at other regions and funding, so what we can do is build on that. You know, just collect, I think it was a Hunt Institute that was working on that, on those numbers, but we definitely will build on that.
Yeah, but the numbers are what they are. We already know what percentage we're getting today. You know that, we know that. And based on our population, it's not our fair share. So I would like for us to, I'd like for you and your staff to get us that number. Okay.
Seems to just complement what we're already trying to accomplish. Okay, that was the last time we had a motion to adjourn.